Hey there, listener. Ever feel like your life is part of some grand epic tale? Like you're living out your own personal myth?
Oh, I'd say that's a universal feeling, for
No.
sure. It's like we're all searching for that deeper meaning, that sense that our lives are part of something bigger than ourselves.
You hit the nail on the head. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're cracking open Mythology Manuscript 5, and it seems like you're ready to explore mythology not just as ancient stories, but as a guide for personal transformation, which, I gotta say, is right up my alley.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How these stories, passed down for centuries, still resonate so deeply with us today. It's like they tap into something fundamental about the human experience.
Absolutely. They really do. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of heroes and monsters, and trust me, we'll get there, let's take a step back for a second. What exactly is mythology, and why should we care about these ancient stories in our modern world?
Well, imagine, if you will, a time before science, before we had explanations for things like thunder, lightning, the changing seasons.
Okay, I'm picturing it, our ancestors looking up at a stormy sky with this mix of awe and terror, probably wondering what it all meant.
Exactly. Myths were our first attempts to explain the unexplainable, to make sense of the world around us and our place in it.
So it was like proto-science in a way, driven by that very human desire to understand the natural world.
Precisely. But mythology is so much more than just ancient explanations for natural phenomena. These stories were and are also vessels for cultural values and beliefs.
That makes sense, like how different cultures have different creation myths that explain the origin of the universe and humanity, right?
Exactly. Those myths reveal what a particular society holds sacred, what they fear, what they aspire to. They're a window into the soul of a culture, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. So by studying mythology, we're not just learning about ancient cultures, but also gaining insights into the human condition itself.
Precisely. And that's where those juicy archetypes come in, The heroes, the tricksters, the divine feminine, these figures, they pop up in myths across cultures, often in very different forms, but with striking similarities.
Okay, see, this is why I love diving into this stuff with you. You always bring such a fresh perspective.
Well, these stories, they're endlessly fascinating.
Let's talk about one archetype in particular that I know fascinates you and me both,
Mm.
the hero.
Ah, yes. The hero's journey, a narrative structure that's as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. It's about facing challenges, overcoming obstacles, and ultimately achieving some kind of transformation.
Totally. And this manuscript uses a truly compelling example of the hero's journey, one that might surprise you. Nelson Mandela's fight against apartheid in South Africa.
Now, that's interesting. I can already see how his life mirrors the classic hero's tale. But tell me more. How does the manuscript connect those dots?
Well, it starts by breaking down Mandela's life into the classic stages of the hero's journey. It all begins with the call to adventure, that moment when the hero is called upon to leave their ordinary world and embark on a perilous quest.
So, in Mandela's case, his call to adventure was his commitment to fighting against the deeply unjust system of apartheid in South Africa.
Exactly. The manuscript frames it as a call to stand up for justice, equality, and basic human dignity, a call he simply couldn't ignore.
Which is so powerful because it highlights the universality of the hero's journey. Whether it's Odysseus yearning to return home or Mandela fighting for social justice, it's about answering a deeper calling, a sense of purpose that drives them forward.
And just like those mythical heroes, Mandela faced moments of hesitation, those internal struggles that make the journey even more compelling.
Ah, yes, the hero's doubt. It's such a humanizing element, reminding us that even the most courageous among us grapple with uncertainty.
The manuscript highlights how Mandela wrestled with the decision of whether to use nonviolent resistance or armed struggle against the apartheid regime. It was a complex moral dilemma, one that he didn't take lightly.
And that's a crucial point. Mandela's commitment to nonviolence was deeply rooted in his beliefs. He understood the power of peaceful protest, but also recognized that there are times when confrontation is unavoidable.
And that's where things take a really dramatic turn in Mandela's story, his arrest in 1962. The manuscript points to this as a major turning point, a descent into the unknown.
It's like those classic myths where the hero descends into the underworld, facing their greatest fears and undergoing a symbolic death and rebirth.
And in a way, that's exactly what prison became for Mandela, a period of profound transformation.
Yeah, it's tough to imagine anyone coming out of that situation unbroken, especially after 27 years. But this manuscript, it really emphasizes how those years, as difficult as they were, they became a crucible for Mandela, a time of incredible inner growth.
It's really remarkable. To find strength and purpose in the face of such adversity, it speaks to the resilience of the human spirit, when you say. It almost seems superhuman. What did he do with all that time?
He never stopped resisting injustice, even from behind bars. But you're right, it wasn't just about resistance. He also used that time for some serious introspection. For learning, he dove headfirst into studying, read anything he could get his hands on, even earned a law degree while he was imprisoned. It's like he transformed his cell into this sanctuary for personal and intellectual growth.
It's incredible. It sounds like those years, as challenging as they were, they allowed him to tap into this wellspring of inner strength, strength that might have remained dormant otherwise, who knows. And then he emerges from prison, not a broken man, but this symbol of hope, of forgiveness, ready to lead his nation toward a brighter future.
Right. It's a true testament to the transformative power of the hero's journey. When you think about those classic myths, right? The hero always returns from their trials changed, forever marked by their experiences. They don't come back the same person they were when they left. They return with greater wisdom, more compassion, a much deeper understanding of themselves and the world around them.
And in Mandela's case, his return with the elixir, as the manuscript puts it, was his release from prison in 1990 and then his leadership in the dismantling of apartheid. It gives me chills just thinking about it.
Right. And the elixir in this case, it wasn't some magical potion, a mythical artifact. It was something far more powerful. The ability to forgive, to reconcile, and to lead a nation, a whole nation, toward healing after decades of division and oppression.
It's an incredible parallel. It makes you think, what elixir do we bring back from our own personal journeys, to share with the world?
It's a question worth some serious pondering. What gifts of wisdom, resilience, compassion have we cultivated through our own trials and tribulations?
Okay, so we've explored the hero, but this manuscript, it doesn't stop there. It delves into other archetypes too, like the trickster. And get this, it uses Loki, Loki from Norse mythology, and wait for it, Steve Jobs as examples.
That's an interesting pairing. It might seem a little counterintuitive at first to think of a mischievous god and a tech visionary in the same breath. But I'm intrigued. I have to know more. What's the connection?
Well, the manuscript highlights how tricksters, despite their reputation for, chaos and mischief, they actually play a crucial role in shaking things up, challenging the status quo. They operate outside the lines, disrupt norms, and force us to see the world from a different perspective.
It's that disruptive energy that often sparks innovation, change. They remind us that progress doesn't always follow a straight path, right?
Exactly. And the manuscript uses Loki as like the prime example. He's always stirring up trouble among the Norse gods, always. But his actions often lead to unexpected outcomes, some destructive for sure, but some surprisingly beneficial.
Loki really embodies that chaotic energy, that force of disruption that can be exhilarating and terrifying all at the same time. He reminds us that not all change is comfortable, sometimes even painful, but it's often necessary for growth.
And when it comes to Steve Jobs, well, the manuscript talks about how he brought that same trickster energy to the tech world. He was known for his rebellious spirit, his relentless pursuit of innovation, and his absolute unwavering belief in his own vision.
Jobs was a master at using that trickster energy to challenge conventional thinking. He definitely wasn't afraid to break the rules, defy expectations, even fail spectacularly. And you know what? In those failures, he often found the seeds of his greatest successes.
He understood that sometimes to create something truly groundbreaking, you had to be willing to break things, to disrupt the status quo, even if it ruffles some feathers along the way.
And isn't that often the catalyst for progress? The willingness to challenge the norm, to question why things have to be a certain way? The trickster reminds us that there's always more than one way to approach a problem, always.
Speaking of challenging norms, let's shift gears a bit and talk about another powerful archetype, the divine feminine. And this isn't just about being nice or motherly. The manuscript emphasizes that the divine feminine, it encompasses a much broader spectrum of energies, from creation and nurturing to, get this, fierceness and power.
It's about recognizing and honoring the full spectrum of feminine energy, wouldn't you say, both within ourselves and in the world around us.
Exactly. And to illustrate this, the manuscript uses some really diverse examples. On one hand, we have Kali, the Hindu goddess of destruction. She's often depicted as this fierce warrior goddess. And then we have Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani activist who advocates for girls' education. It's quite a contrast.
Now, those are two powerful figures, that's for sure. Both embody very different aspects of the divine feminine, but both are forces to be reckoned with. How does the manuscript connect them?
Well, it starts by explaining that Kali, even with her fearsome appearance, is actually about destroying negative forces to create space for positive change. She represents transformation and rebirth, the cyclical nature of life, death, and renewal.
Which, let's face it, is often a necessary part of growth, isn't it? Sometimes we just have to dismantle those old structures, those outdated beliefs, to make way for something new to emerge.
And that's where Malala's story comes in. Despite facing threats and violence for her activism, she continues to champion education, equality for girls. She embodies that same courageous spirit of the divine feminine.
She's a powerful reminder that the divine feminine isn't about shrinking back or being passive. It's about harnessing your voice, speaking your truth, and fighting for what you believe in, even when it's really, really difficult.
It's a powerful message for sure, especially for those who have been told they have to choose, between being strong and being feminine. The divine feminine, it encompasses both, the nurturing and the fierce.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance within ourselves, recognizing that we are capable of both great compassion and unwavering strength.
This manuscript is chock full of insights. We've explored the hero, the trickster, the divine feminine, and there's still so much more to uncover. Up next, we'll delve into the wisdom of the sage and the often misunderstood power of the shadow. This manuscript, it dives into some more familiar archetypes too, like those mentor figures, the guides, the ones that seem to radiate a certain wisdom. Those ones we often find ourselves looking to for guidance in our own lives, kind of like the wise old sage archetype.
Oh, absolutely. The keeper of ancient wisdom, right. The one who's always there to offer guidance and support on the hero's journey. It's a powerful archetype, no doubt about it. One that really seems to resonate with people across cultures and throughout time.
It definitely resonates with me. And this manuscript does not disappoint. It covers everything. You've got your classic mythical figures like Merlin, from the King Arthur legends, Odin from Norse mythology, even dives into real-life mentorships.
Yeah.
Like, get this, the complex relationship between Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud.
Oh, wow. Now that's a fascinating example. Talk about two giants in the field of psychology, right? But their relationship, it was definitely complicated, marked by disagreements and eventually a parting of ways. It's a good reminder that even in mentorship, even with those we hold in high regard, there's always room for individual growth, for divergence.
It's a good reminder that it's not about becoming a carbon copy of your mentor, but rather taking their wisdom and integrating it into your own unique path, wouldn't you say?
100%.
And what I find really interesting is how this manuscript seems to emphasize that everyone has the potential to tap into their own inner sage. Like we all have that wellspring of wisdom and insight within us. It comes from lived experience, from reflection, from our willingness to learn from our mistakes.
I completely agree. It's about cultivating those qualities of wisdom, patience, discernment. And that takes time. It's about becoming a lifelong learner, always open to new knowledge and perspectives.
So you're saying we don't necessarily need to go searching for a Gandalf or a Yoda in the flesh?
Not necessarily, no. Although, wouldn't that be cool? But in all seriousness, sometimes the wisest voice, the one we need to listen to most, is the one we cultivate within ourselves. If we can quiet the noise and learn to listen, that is.
That's actually quite reassuring. It makes me think that maybe we're all capable of becoming our own mentors in a way.
Exactly. It's about learning to trust our own intuition, that inner compass that's always there, guiding us towards our own truth, our own unique purpose.
Okay, so we've covered the hero, the trickster, that divine feminine energy, the wise old sage, all fascinating archetypes, each complex in their own right. But this manuscript doesn't shy away from those darker aspects of the human experience either. It also takes a deep dive into, you guessed it, the shadow self.
Ah, yes, the shadow. That part of ourselves we often try to hide, deny, even repress. But it holds immense power for both destruction and, get this, transformation.
It's definitely an archetype we might be tempted to just, sweep under the rug and pretend isn't there. But the manuscript uses a really interesting example, Robert Downey Jr.'s story.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, his struggles with addiction and then his journey to recovery, it's all pretty well documented, right? But how does this tie into the whole shadow archetype?
Well, you see, Downey's story is a really powerful example of how confronting our shadow, those parts of ourselves we'd rather not acknowledge, can lead to some pretty profound personal growth. It's not about pretending those darker aspects don't exist. It's about acknowledging them, then integrating them, and ultimately finding a path to healing.
It reminds me of that Joseph Campbell quote, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." It's in those dark, shadowy places where we often discover the greatest potential for transformation, wouldn't you say?
Without a doubt. But it takes courage to face those parts of ourselves, those shadow selves, to acknowledge the ways in which we might have hurt others, even ourselves, and that's not always easy.
And it takes compassion to forgive ourselves and move forward on the path toward healing. It seems like the shadow, as daunting as it can be, well, it's an essential part of the human experience because it's in integrating those darker aspects of ourselves that we actually become whole.
I can agree more. The shadow, it holds the potential for both great destruction and incredible transformation. How we choose to integrate it, that's what determines our path.
Which leads us beautifully to the final archetype the manuscript explores, death and rebirth. And I'm not just talking about physical death here, but those symbolic deaths and rebirths that we all experience throughout life, those periods of endings and new beginnings.
Ah, yes, those cycles of endings and beginnings, of letting go of what no longer serves us and embracing the unknown. Those are universal themes, my friend, woven throughout mythology. It's a reminder that change, while often challenging, even painful at times, is an inevitable part of life, and maybe even something to be embraced.
It's like nature itself, right? The way autumn makes way for winter, which then gives birth to spring. It's a continuous cycle, this dance between death and rebirth, over and over again. And the manuscript, it points out that this isn't just limited to ancient myths either. It highlights Viktor Frankl's experience in those Nazi concentration camps during World War II.
Frankl's story is a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit. His ability to find meaning in the face of unimaginable suffering is just, well, it's awe-inspiring to say the least. And his development of logotherapy, which, for our listeners, emphasizes that inherent human search for meaning as essential for well-being, well, that was born out of his experiences in the camps.
It's a reminder that even in those darkest of times, even when it feels like all hope is lost, we still have the capacity to find that spark, that flicker of hope, a reason to keep going, to choose life.
Absolutely. And it's often through those experiences of profound loss and suffering that we discover our greatest strength, our resilience, our capacity for love and compassion, even when it feels impossible.
So listener, as we begin to wrap up our deep dive today, it seems like these ancient myths, they aren't just stories, are they? They're more like blueprints, guides for navigating this human experience.
I like that blueprints. They provide a framework for better understanding ourselves, our relationships with others, our place in the world.
It's like we've been given this incredible set of tools, a roadmap of sorts, for navigating those universal themes that connect us all. Love, loss, betrayal, redemption, all those messy, beautiful things that make us human.
And the real adventure, the hero's journey, if you will, it begins when we start to recognize these archetypes in our own lives, in our own stories.
So it's about asking ourselves, which archetype resonates most deeply with me in this moment? What can I learn from the hero, the trickster, the divine feminine, the wise sage, even from our own shadow selves? And maybe the most important question, what kind of story do I want to write with my one wild and precious life?
And remembering that it's an ongoing process, this journey of self-discovery. It unfolds over time. There's no rush, no finish line. It's a lifelong adventure.
This deep dive has been quite a journey. We've explored this incredible tapestry of archetypes, each one offering a unique lens to view ourselves and the world around us.
And the real magic, it happens when we take these insights, we weave them into our understanding, and we use them to navigate our lives. We become the heroes and heroines of our own unique stories.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And on that note, listener, it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive. But remember, the journey of self-discovery, it never truly ends. It's a lifelong adventure, and we're all in this together.